So many might not think it's possible, but I purchased this Jeep TJ and modified it for a little over $4,000, which is less than your average used Honda Civic. So before we get into everything that we did to this TJ for that price, we need to get this thing out on the road. But we ran into a problem taking it for a test drive, so we're going to go ahead and talk about that and see if we can get it fixed and get it out on the road. I don't know if you guys ever had a build that you're trying to get done and you're rushing to get it done and you just want to get it out, drive it, see how it's doing. Well, that's how this TJ was. All I wanted to do is get it on the road. Well, the problem I ran into is I backed it out of the garage and I started to pull forward, and as soon as I pulled forward, I knew there was a huge problem with it. And so I drove it down the driveway just a little bit before I got to the road, and man, was this thing just vibrating and kind of just jumping all over the place. So I automatically thought, well, maybe it's the wheel spacers that I put on it, since they were pretty cheap and they're from Amazon, or since I did a 2.5-inch lift kit on it, that maybe since I didn't do a drop bracket or the slip yoke eliminator kit on this TJ, that maybe it was just a driveline vibration. Well, automatically, when I started backing it up, I noticed the transmission was kind of hopping inside the Jeep, so I just automatically kind of thought, well, you know what, it's probably a driveline issue. And sure enough, it definitely was. What I did, I pulled the rear drive shaft, put it in four-wheel drive, and drove it down the driveway, and that vibration and the hopping went away. So automatically, I knew it was for that. Although I probably should have checked a little more, because I hopped on Facebook Marketplace and started looking for a drop spacer to drop this transmission skid plate down. Because I really didn't want to do the slip yoke eliminator on it, just because this is budget friendly and it's just pretty much a daily driver that I can go out and play with. So I was like, you know what, let's go ahead and put drop spacers on it. So I got on Facebook Marketplace. Some guy was selling for like $25. I talked him down to $20. So saved a couple bucks on it. So I got back to the shop, went ahead and slammed those spacers in there. The skid plate come down, no problem. It come with new bolts, so it all went back together like it should. Well, I went over and grabbed the drive shaft that I took out, went to go put it back in, and I should have checked it. The U-joints were seized. So all along, it probably didn't even need that drop spacer, because I put many of 2.5-inch lift kits on these TJs, have never needed to do the drop on it or the SYE kit. So that's why I was like, well, I probably should have checked it. But I'm going to leave that drop spacers in there just because, you know what, it's just going to make the angles better anyhow. So I'm just going to leave them in there. It's $20, whatever. It was probably a half hour worth of work. So yeah, definitely make sure you check everything before you just start buying parts, because that's kind of what I just did right there. But I was in such a hurry to get this thing on the road. So let's go ahead and check out those U-joints that are on this rear drive shaft. All right. So here's the factory drive shaft that was in our Jeep, and this is the problem. This is what was causing the problem. So the upper U-joint by the transfer case was still good. Kind of sticky in places. So it was going to need changed anyhow. Well, the rear U-joint that was at the axle, it was definitely getting hard to spin this way. But when you go to the other cups here, this one, let's see if I can get it off here. It's pretty dried up. Whoa. So we can look at all that nice rust, all the rusted needle bearings. Horrible. So anyhow, that just wasn't moving, and you can kind of see the other side was worse. I couldn't even get this side to spin. Now you should be able to spin that by hand. So that was what was causing our driveline vibration. I'm not really sure why I didn't notice it when I was driving on the road when I first bought it. But just putting the lift kit on there and changing that angle just enough, it didn't allow that U-joint to move. So man, it was just causing all kinds of havoc on that driveline. So we're going to go ahead and change out the U-joints on this rear drive shaft. And most of you might already know how to change U-joints, but for the ones that don't, these are the tools that I like to use to make changing U-joints very easy, or at least I feel like it does. I use ball joint press to get the U-joints out. And then obviously I like to use my impact on the ball joint press. Sometimes you need a socket to tap the U-joint in far enough, since these U-joints don't sit flush with the drop shaft. They have to sit inside somewhat so you can get the clip in there. Axle shafts are a little different. The C-clips are on the inside, and the drive shafts, the clips are on the outside. So I like to use that, and I'll just tap down to get the U-joint where it needs to go. But I like to use a hammer to get the U-joint seated in place. So we're going to go ahead and, and sometimes you do need some pliers. Sometimes the U-joint cap doesn't want to come out when you get it pressed out, so you just grab a hold of it with some pliers, wiggle it, and you can get it out that way. So we're going to go ahead and knock these U-joints out really quick with the ball joint press, and then we're going to go ahead and get our new U-joints in. Now when you're doing this, you got to be careful you have the ball joint press set up right, because you don't want to bend the ears on this rear drive shaft. So definitely just be careful when you're doing that. Now this is where you're going to need the pliers. This cap don't want to come all the way out, but it's pressed as far as I can press it. So I'm going to go ahead and grab some pliers, and I'm going to work that cap out. Now sometimes the U-joint pops out enough, and it's not but you can't get it all the way out. Like you can get it like right there, but it don't want to come back out. So what you need to do is set this back in here as best you can. Make sure it's straight, because if you drive this back through here and it's not straight, it's going to gouge the inside of your drive shaft, so you don't want to do that. So you just set it in there, make sure it's as straight as possible, and then all I do is just take the hammer and I get it started so that I can get the ball joint press on this side now. There. Now it's seated in there like it needs to be. So now I can go ahead and run it home and get it out of there with this ball joint press. There it is. U-joint out. So not too bad, but it does take a little bit of time. Man, you can really see, like, I mean, they were just all rust. Like, look at all the powder that's coming out of that. So definitely should have checked the U-joints. Having that driveline vibration. But I tell you what, just 'cause I didn't notice it driving it before I did the lift, it just didn't seem like there was going to be a problem with it. So that was my fault. When I pulled that out of there, I should have just took it, because I probably wouldn't even needed that transmission drop. But it is what it is. We got it in there. It's going to help the driveline vibrations be a little happy. I'm going to go ahead and get this other U-joint out of here, but it does have a Zerk fitting on it. So when you're pressing these out, take those Zerk fittings out, because if not, they're going to hit and you're not going to be able to get the cap out. So I'm going to go ahead and take the Zerk fitting off, and then I'll go ahead and press this U-joint out. I'm having a little issues grabbing this U-joint cap out of this end here. I'm going to use some vice grips. And vice grips have a little trick. If you don't know, most of them have an Allen on the end. So you don't have to tighten them as much as you can and then try to squeeze them as tight as you can on there. You don't have to do that. You can back this sucker off and just pop them on there easy. Then you just take your little Allen here. I don't know, I think this one is 5 millimeters. I'll pop this sucker on there, and then you just crank this down, and it'll get the best bite possible like this. I honestly went many years before I figured that out. Never paid attention to it. I always like put it on something and like squeeze the living life out of it to try to get it to clamp onto it. So after all those years of fighting, probably carpal tunnel from squeezing these freaking vice grips, yeah, there's an Allen on there. And just tighten that thing down as tight as you can get it. And same when you're taking it off, instead of like trying to force these off here and take pliers and grab that end, just loosen it up with the Allen, it'll come right off. There we go. I got the cap spinning. See if I can work that out of there. Right here's where I wish I had a vise. One of these days, I'll have a vise. One of these days. Alright, got the cap out. And that U-joint looks like it probably would have been alright. So the trick is, when you're taking them off, just do the same thing when you tightened it up. Look, don't even have to fight to get it off. So, pretty simple. Okay, let's go ahead and get the U-joints back in this rear drive shaft. I like to use Spicer U-joints on all of my Jeeps. I've tried some other brands like Moog and your cheap Duralast and stuff like that. Not a fan of any of those. My favorite U-joint, my go-to U-joint is Spicer U-joints. So, part number for the rear drive shaft for the U-joints for a Spicer is 51310. So if you're looking for Spicer U-joints for your rear drive shaft, like I said, it's 5-1310. So we're going to go ahead and get this U-joint in here. I feel like it's a lot easier to get the U-joints in than it is to get out. So what I like to do is I pop the caps off the ends that I pop the caps off the ends that I'm going to put into the drive shaft. I leave the caps on the other ends just because it's a lot easier to hold. So I like to use a hammer to get these U-joints installed. So I'm going to go ahead and slip that U-joint in there. Then I just take the cap and I try to hold the U-joint inside the cap. So when I tap the cap, the U-joint needs to move along with the cap. If you don't and that pulls out, you can pull the needle bearings out and then you got to start over. So I like to kind of hold it and I just work it in like this. See how I'm holding the U-joint up against the cap while I'm driving it in there? So I'll get one end in there and then I'll go to the other end. And I try to do the same for that too. Sometimes I'll feel a little froggy and I'll just set that puppy in there and I'll run it home. So just like that. Ran that bad boy home. So now I just got to tap that down there and I'll get the clips in there. So the seat, usually the hammer only gets it flush in there. Now you could turn the ball peen around and hit it down in there a little more, but I just take your socket. I was talking about the clips. These are the clips you use on the drive shaft on these, and they go on the outside. When you're doing like I said, the axle shafts, the C-clips are on the inside. These are a lot easier, at least I like to think they are. What I do, I just take some needle nose, get the clip kind of started in there. And then I would just take a socket and just kind of tap down in there and make sure it goes into the grooves. Because if it don't, the U-joint's going to walk its way out. Alright, that one is seated in there. Sometimes I'll take the screwdriver too, work my way around this, just make sure it's in there. Alright, that clip's in there. Now we're going to, obviously you want to make sure it still moves too, because if any of those needle bearings moved, that thing will lock up tight and you won't get the clip in there. So now I'm going to go ahead and tap down this other side since that clip's in there. It's only going to go as far as the other clip down there, so you don't have to worry about it coming out. Pretty simple to install these. I know sometimes you can have some issues. I've had times where the needle bearings pop out when I'm trying to put it in there and cause all kinds of problems, then I got to take it back out. I've had times where I put one of these in and I completely mess it up and have to go get another one. So that does happen. But you just do your best, pay attention, and majority of the time you'll be okay putting this back together. Now I got to get the other part in here. It moves freely through all your movements here. And as long as it does that and your clips are in, you're good to go. Just like that. We got U-joints on the rear drive shaft. So if you've never done it before, they might take a little bit of time, but they're not that bad to do. So once you do a couple of them, you won't have any problems doing them. At the beginning of the video, I told you that I built this Jeep for a little over $4,000, and that is definitely correct. So I feel like it's a pretty nice Jeep. The frame is not rotted out. Has standard 44 in the rear. It is 6-speed, so it is what it is. Some like manual, some like automatic. For me, I don't really care. But let's go ahead and I'll show you on the whiteboard on what all I installed on this Jeep and just kind of talk a little bit about it, and we'll get a tally on how much it really cost us. Alright, so here's the list for everything that's on our budget TJ, and we're going to start at the very beginning on what we got the Jeep for. So we bought the Jeep for $2,000. I found this Jeep on Facebook Marketplace. The lady was asking $4 grand for it. So I went ahead and drove over there, took a look at it, and just kind of gave her a list on everything that needed done to it. So the valve cover, top, front tires, wheel bearings, U-joints. You know, there's a bunch of other kind of like rust areas that I needed to take care of. And I just gave her kind of a rough estimate of what it would cost me to do it. So I went ahead and shot her an offer for $2,000. And she turned it down, which the Jeep probably would have been worth that $4 grand because the frame was pretty spotless. So she turned it down, and I walked away. So about a week later, she messaged me on Facebook and said, you know what, I just want to get rid of the Jeep. You can have it for $2 grand. So I rushed over there and handed her $2 grand cash to get this done because I knew it was a good deal. So that's where we started at the Jeep with $2 grand. So kind of what I had in mind for this build is just to keep it as budget friendly as possible. I wanted it to be able to be a daily driver, but I wanted to be able to go off-roading and perform a little bit also. It didn't have to be anything extreme, not like needing 40s and 1-tons or anything like that, which that's also very nice to have, but that's not what I was looking for in this build. So I just wanted to keep it as budget friendly as possible, but I wanted it to be able to perform when needed when we go off-roading. So we decided to just go with a 2.5-inch lift kit because there's less things you need to change on it going that high. If I would have went over that 2.5-inch lift, I would have needed to change a little more. I would have had to do the slip yoke eliminator and probably ended up having to change some other stuff along with that, like the control arms and stuff like that. So I just didn't want to get into that. So we went with the 2.5-inch rough country lift, which only come with shocks and springs. Now, it did not come with disconnect sway bar links, which was okay, but the sway bar links on this Jeep were broke, so I did have to replace them with just normal sway bar links. I didn't do disconnects at this time. Maybe down the road I will. So with the Jeep was $2,000, the top was $300, and then the sway bar links were $30. I got those off Amazon. So pretty much everything I got was off Amazon or Facebook Marketplace. But majority of the time, Amazon, and then if I could, I tried to wait for Amazon Prime Day to try to get even better deals. So definitely keep an eye out on that. And then this Jeep did not come with a track bar relocation bracket for the rear, but I was kind of having some issues with it when I put it together, and I felt like it probably needed that. So I went ahead and got the rear track bar relocation bracket off Amazon. Off Amazon is also, which was at $25, and then the drop spacers that I got off Marketplace. They were originally, he wanted 25. I got them for 20. And then it needed a top, so I went ahead and got a Smitty built top off Amazon, which was $255. It's not a bad top, but it is not a best top. The quality of it is definitely not as nice as a best top, and the thickness of the material is not there either. But for what I want to do with this and having it get scratched and stuff like that, I didn't want to spend that kind of money knowing the windows and stuff like that were going to get beat up. So we stuck with the Smitty built top. And then with it only having 33-inch tires on it, I did definitely want to get some rock sliders on it, just because it might not sit that high, but if we did end up smashing underneath of the Jeep, I wanted some protection. So we just got some sliders off Amazon. I'm not even sure what the name of them are, but they would definitely do what we need them to do. And then also on some repairs, we ended up having to do the right front wheel bearing, which was $45. I replaced axle shaft U-joints, which I already had U-joints sitting in the shop, so I did not put the cost of the U-joints in here. Same with the cost of the drive shaft U-joints. They are not in here either. But if you wanted to, you would say probably $100 in U-joints. Also, the valve cover was leaking pretty bad, the valve cover gasket. So we went ahead and replaced that with, I think it was a Felt Pro for $40. I like to try to use that Felt Pro on any type of gaskets like that. And then for the tires, we found some pretty cheap tires. They were $700. That's with getting them mounted and balanced. And then for the wheels, we found 17-inch wheels off JLU. It was a Sport, I think it was, for $200. And then to make those wheels fit, we had to go from a wheel adapter from a 5x4.5 to a 5x5. And we had to go to an 1.5-inch spacer. I tried to use 1.25 inches, and the rear tires were rubbing. So if you're looking to get JLU wheels and go like a 12.5-inch wide tire, you definitely need to go with at least 1.5 inch spacer trying to put a JLU wheel on your TJ. If not, you might have some rubbing in the back. And definitely, I don't like going past that 1.5 inches just because it puts a lot of strain on those parts. So if you can keep it at just 1.5 inch wheel spacer, you should be okay. So then the grand total without, oh, you know what? I forgot. PR15. I got that off Amazon. There was a degreaser, prep, and the paint for, I think it was $115. So I did do that. I just knocked off what surface rust was on there. I did the degreaser, did the prep, just like it said, and then I put the PR15 on there. And I also put Eastwood internal frame paint. I did the inside of the frame with that. The price is not on there either because I had a bunch of those cans laying around the shop. But if you wanted to kind of price those out, I think they were like $15 to $20 a can, and I used 4 cans on this. So if you wanted to add that in the budget, you could, but I did not just because I didn't have to pay for it. But anyhow, with this and everything else, the grand total of the Jeep was only $4,030, which it's really hard to find just a stock TJ for that price. I usually see them for around like $6,500, and then finding a rotted TJ, they're asking like $2,500 to $3,500 for a rotted TJ that has a blown out frame, and some of them 4 cylinders. Like definitely try to stay away from those. Deals are out there, so just look for them. So I'm gonna go ahead and get this drive shaft on there, and then we're gonna hopefully take this for a drive down the road. So let's get that on there and see if we can take it for a test drive. Whew. Last time I didn't even make it down this far. Last time I just seen the shifter was hopping and it was vibrating like crazy. Uh-oh. Yeah! I definitely got to do a little bit of a wheel alignment. But, drive down the road, baby. Not too shabby for a $4,030 cheap Jeep build. Doesn't drive too bad either. Definitely not perfect. So I'm super pleased with the budget TJ. For the amount of money we spent on it, I think we did pretty well with it. But if you guys like builds like this, I do have another build that I started. It's on a family cheap Jeep. You guys should definitely go check it out if you like this video. If you guys have any questions about anything Jeep related, please leave a comment below and I'll get back to them.